Welcome back to Brinicle Reads, the channel where chilling stories come to life. Today, we're diving into What We Buried in the River, a tale of friendship, betrayal, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment below with your thoughts, because the river remembers, and so will you. I used to think that running away meant leaving the past behind. That if you built enough walls around yourself, filled your days with success, deadlines, and the hum of city life, the ghosts would stay in the shadows where they belonged. But shadows have a way of moving, slipping through cracks you didn't know existed. That's what it felt like the day the message arrived. The river remembers. I was in my office, high above the city in a glass tower that gleamed like some monument to ambition, when the words appeared on my phone. No number, no signature, just 4 words that made the air in the room thicken. I read them 3 times, then 4, hoping that repetition would somehow shrink the weight behind them. But the weight only grew. It hit me like the cold Mississippi water on that night, 20 years ago. I remember that night too vividly, though I've tried to pretend otherwise. 16 years old, foolish, invincible, and utterly unprepared for the consequences of a single careless moment. Aaron, Noah, and I, my so-called brothers in everything but blood, had made the mistake of thinking we could control what happened. We swore a pact. A silence sealed with the kind of teenage certainty that made betrayal seem impossible. At the time, I thought silence was protection. Now I wasn't so sure. Looking around my office, I could feel the emptiness behind the polished veneer. The awards on the shelves gleamed, yes, but they didn't shine in the dark corners of my mind. I had built my life carefully, meticulously, but all it took was a text, for simple words, and the dam broke. Memories flooded in uninvited. Laughter on the riverbank. A shove that went too far. The scream that split the night. And then, the water. God, the water. I tried to brush it off. Probably a prank, I muttered to myself, tossing my phone onto the leather couch. But deep down, I knew better. That message wasn't random. Someone remembered. Someone was awake when I had spent decades pretending to sleep. Aaron and Noah. The names echoed in my mind. We hadn't spoken in years, not really. We sent the occasional holiday card, liked each other's posts on social media, but the real connection, whatever fragile thread had tied us together, had snapped the day we buried the truth. I wondered if they had received the same message. Or if it was only me, the one who had walked the straightest line, who had somehow managed to look successful while carrying the heaviest guilt. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, not because I wanted it, but because it felt ritualistic, as though the amber liquid could somehow dilute the weight pressing on my chest. The city below glimmered, oblivious. People were alive with trivial worries, traffic, deadlines, weekend plans. And I was trapped in a memory I had hoped would dissolve in the passing of years. I remembered how Aaron had laughed that night by the river, that careless, reckless laugh that had always meant trouble. Noah had been quieter, calculating, but his loyalty was fierce, the kind that made you believe nothing could ever come between you. And me, I had tried to hold them both together, like some hapless ringmaster controlling a circus I barely understood. We had been inseparable, invincible, until one mistake shattered everything. The accident. The river. The scream. And the boy who didn't make it out. I still remember the taste of fear in my mouth, the way my hands shook as we made our pact. We swore to bury it, not just in the river, but in our memories. Never speak of it. Never let it touch the rest of our lives. And for a long time, it seemed to work. Until today. The text had awakened something that years of distance and denial couldn't drown. I found myself walking the streets near my childhood home in a haze, the city noises fading into something else entirely. I saw the river in my mind's eye before I even got there, its dark water stretching endlessly, silent and unforgiving. It remembered. How could it not? Water keeps secrets, but it also tells them to those who listen closely. I remember staring at the Mississippi in my dreams, imagining the boy's face, and wondering if I had done enough to make it right, or if some debts, once incurred, can never be repaid. My hands twitched as I thought of Aaron and Noah, and I realized I hadn't considered what reunion would mean. We had buried the past 20 years ago, but nothing stays buried forever, not in the river, not in the mind, and certainly not in the heart. I called Aaron first. My voice was steadier than I felt. "We need to talk," I said. There was silence on the other end. "And then, I've been waiting for this day," he replied. Waiting? 20 years, and he had been waiting? I didn't understand, not fully. But I would soon. Noah was harder to reach. He always had been. Calculated, precise, the one who measured risk and consequence like a surgeon. "Luke," he said finally, after several rings, "you know we can't just revisit this. Some things are meant to stay buried." His voice carried that old cautionary tone, the one that had always made me feel both safe and frustrated. I realized, then, that he, too, was aware. Or at least aware that someone was trying to force our hands. I spent the night staring at the city lights, thinking of the river, thinking of us. Friendship had been our anchor once, a bond forged in laughter and mischief. But betrayal had been the current, subtle at first, then impossible to resist. And guilt, it was the undertow, dragging everything I had built beneath the surface. I couldn't escape it. Not anymore. The river was calling. By morning, I had booked a flight home. The office, the city, my achievements, they suddenly felt meaningless. My childhood home awaited, the place where the pact had been sealed, where we had thought ourselves clever and untouchable. But cleverness is no match for memory, and untouchable is a promise the past never honors. As the plane descended, I saw the town sprawled along the river like a secret waiting to be uncovered. Houses lined the banks, some dilapidated, some untouched by time, but all hiding pieces of the story we had refused to tell. The water shimmered in the morning sun, innocent, yet ominous, reflecting a past we had tried, and failed, to bury. I thought of Aaron and Noah again. Friends, once. Companions in a tragedy that defined us. Or perhaps it had defined me more than it had them. And yet, here we were, about to confront something none of us had faced in 20 years. Something that refused to stay in the past. The river remembers. And so, apparently, must we. I didn't know who had sent the message, but I knew it wasn't random. The past had teeth, and they were sinking in. I braced myself. Because the reunion wasn't going to be what I expected. Not by a long shot. The flight felt longer than it should have, though the distance wasn't far. I stared out the window at the winding Mississippi below, its gray waters weaving a ribbon through the land like a scar we'd all tried to ignore. The city I had fled to, with its lights, glass towers, and distractions, had taught me to bury the past under achievements and schedules. But the river, that river remembered everything. I arrived at the small airport, and for a moment, the familiar quiet of my hometown pressed in on me. Not the suffocating quiet of a city at night, but the kind that lingers in streets where nothing has truly changed. And yet, it had. Time leaves its fingerprints, whether you notice them or not. Driving along the old roads toward the riverbank, I passed houses that hadn't changed, or maybe I had. A convenience store that had been run by old Mrs. Calhoun was now a new-age coffee shop. The hardware store where Noah used to linger after school had shuttered its doors long ago. And there, at the curve where we had spent countless summer nights laughing and dreaming, the water lay calm, deceptively peaceful. Calm. Until it wasn't. I parked near the river and stepped out. The air smelled like mud and rain, with a faint hint of pine from the surrounding woods. The kind of smell that pulls memory from the depths of your mind, whether you want it to or not. And it did. I remembered the screams, the panic, the terrible rush to do something irreversible. I remembered the boy's eyes, wide and terrified, looking up at us. And then, the water swallowing everything. Aaron was already there when I arrived. He leaned against the rusted railing of the old dock, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, looking like he had stepped out of a photograph of our teenage selves, though years of tension and responsibility had etched lines into his face. "Luke," he said, voice casual but with an edge I couldn't place. "You finally decided to come back." I studied him. He looked different. Older, yes, but also sharper, calculating. That old laugh of his had thinned into something quieter, measured. The reckless energy that used to make him the center of every misadventure had been replaced by a precision I didn't entirely recognize. And yet, he carried the same weight in his eyes, the unspoken, the secret. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got your message." I didn't add that it wasn't really his message, not really. Whoever sent the first text had done something impossible, dredged up everything we had tried to bury without a single name attached. Aaron's smirk was thin. "Funny how the river has a way of bringing people back, isn't it?" I didn't answer immediately. I felt the pull of memory like a tide dragging at my ankles. And then I heard footsteps behind me. Noah. He emerged from the shadows of the trees, tall and stoic, eyes as unreadable as they had been when we were 16. I had never trusted him entirely, even as a boy. He had a way of seeing the truth behind the lies, and that made him dangerous, in a way I didn't always appreciate. "Luke," he said, voice low. "I wondered if you'd come. Or if you'd just keep pretending this didn't happen." I swallowed hard. Pretending had been the only survival tactic I had known. But Noah had never pretended. He had never hidden, even when it hurt. And now, as I stood between the two men who had once been my closest friends, I realized just how fragile the bond had become. 20 years had passed, but the river had never forgotten. We walked along the bank, silent at first. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. I could feel the subtle shifts in Aaron and Noah, the way Aaron's jaw tightened whenever we neared the bend in the river where it happened, or the way Noah's eyes darted, calculating. And me, well, I was unraveling inside, like a thread pulled too hard. "You both remember," I said finally, forcing words into the quiet. "The night." Aaron shrugged, pretending casualness. "I remember what I need to. That's enough." Noah's gaze, however, didn't leave me. "Enough? Is it ever enough, Luke?" His voice carried the weight of someone who had never been able to forget. And that was the problem. He remembered everything. Every detail, every lie, every promise we had made to ourselves and each other. We passed the bend where the accident had happened. The river curved, deceptively calm, as if mocking us. I remembered the splash, the frantic hands, the panic. I remembered the pact we made: never speak, never tell, never let the past touch the future. And yet here we were, decades later, forced to confront it. Forced by someone, or something, that refused to let us forget. Aaron's voice cut through my thoughts. "You think this is about us? About the past?" His smirk had returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe someone wants a confession. Maybe they think one of us owes them something. Maybe they just want to watch the truth come out. Noah snorted, dry and bitter. Or maybe someone remembers it differently than we do. Maybe someone knows more than any of us think. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. The implication wasn't just that someone was manipulating us, it was that the truth we thought we shared might not be the truth at all. That night had been chaotic, traumatic, and full of fear. Our memories had been our armor, carefully reconstructed to protect us. But armor cracks. Memories shift. And lies have a way of revealing themselves, whether you're ready or not. We reached the old tree, the one we used to climb as kids, the one that had been a lookout, a hideout, a witness to our teenage conspiracies. Now it loomed over the river like a silent sentinel, branches gnarled with age. I reached out, brushing my fingers against the bark, and felt a jolt of memory so sharp it made my chest ache. I remembered standing here, making promises we couldn't keep, thinking we were clever, thinking we could cheat fate. But the river remembers, and trees remember too. Aaron leaned against the trunk, arms crossed. "It's strange," he said quietly. "How normal everything looks. How unchanged the world seems. And yet," he trailed off, eyes on the water. Noah said nothing, but his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His silence spoke volumes. He had always been the one to keep score, to notice discrepancies, to sense when the balance was off. And balance had been off that night, off ever since. The tension hung between us like the humid summer air. And then I felt it, the subtle signs that someone else had been here. Not physically, perhaps, but in the messages left behind, in the timing of our reunion, in the way the river seemed to whisper secrets we weren't ready to hear. "You think it's one of us," I said finally, voice low. "That someone wants the truth from Aaron or Noah, or me." Aaron shook his head. "I don't know. But whoever it is, they're patient. Careful. They've been waiting. Maybe 20 years waiting. And now, well, now they want it out." Noah finally spoke, his voice calm but cold. "We need to be careful. The past doesn't just come back for closure, Luke. It comes back for reckoning." I nodded, though the chill in my gut warned me I wasn't ready for either. Reckoning. The word echoed in my mind like the slap of water against stone. It wasn't just about facing the past, it was about what we were willing to do to protect ourselves, about which truths we could handle and which would destroy us. We stayed by the river until dusk, talking in fragments, circling around the memories we weren't ready to share. It was like navigating a minefield. Every word, every gesture could set off old guilt, old resentment. And yet, there was no way to avoid it. We had been pulled back here, to this place, by something bigger than ourselves, and I knew that whatever came next, nothing would remain the same. As night fell, the river reflected the last traces of sunlight, dark and infinite, reminding me of the depths of secrets and the weight they carry. I looked at Aaron and Noah, once inseparable, now divided by years of silence, by memory, by survival. And I realized that reunion wasn't about friendship anymore. It was about survival, truth, and the reckoning the river demanded. I took a deep breath, feeling the humid night press against my skin. Tomorrow, we would begin to untangle the past. But tonight the river was calm, almost mocking in its serenity. And I knew, deep down, that calm never lasted. Because the river remembers. And so, we would remember too. The night I left the city behind and returned to the river, I thought I was ready to face my past. I wasn't. Not really. Because memory is a treacherous thing. It shifts, warps, and sometimes lies outright. And when it comes to trauma, it becomes a survival mechanism, selective, protective, and dangerously unreliable. I tried to recall that night clearly, but every detail seemed smeared at the edges, like an old photograph left in water too long. 16 years old, the three of us, Luke, Aaron, Noah, invincible in our own adolescent minds. The air was thick, summer heavy, sticky with humidity, the kind that makes your skin stick to clothes and your heartbeat thrum in your ears. The river shimmered, deceptively calm, reflecting the last traces of a sun we barely noticed. Aaron had insisted we go to the bend, the one spot where the river curved sharply, where the current was deceptively swift. "Come on," he'd said, flashing that reckless grin that used to make me feel like anything was possible. "You're too careful, Luke. Live a little." Noah had been hesitant. That was typical. Ever the cautious one, always weighing risk against reward. But he had followed anyway, because loyalty, or fear of losing face, made him. And I, trying to be the bridge between them, the unspoken mediator, had followed too. We were three, and in our foolish, naive minds, that made us unstoppable. The accident, it's hard to relive it without flinching. My memory shifts every time I think of it. Sometimes I see Aaron leaning too close to the edge, laughter turning into panic as he slips. Other times, it's Noah, frozen for a second too long, as if weighing a choice he couldn't undo. And always, the boy. The one we hadn't meant to hurt. The one whose life became collateral in a night of recklessness. I remember the sound first. Not the splash, not the scream, but the quiet crack of panic that settled over us. It wasn't instant chaos, it was the slow realization that something had gone irreparably wrong. Hands reached, voices called, but the river doesn't forgive hesitation. It doesn't care about intentions. It only takes. Aaron's face twisted in fear. "Luke, help me," he shouted. I tried, of course. I always tried. But my hands couldn't grab him fast enough. And in that terrifying stretch of seconds, I realized something I had never admitted: I had failed him. Noah's voice cut through the panic. "Grab the branch," he yelled, but he was a step behind. And I froze, the terror rooting me to the spot. My mind raced, my limbs refused to cooperate, and I watched as the boy was pulled under, the water swallowing everything. The screams came next, ours mingling with his. I remember a tug at my sleeve, Aaron's grip, Noah's yelling. But it wasn't enough. It never was. And then the aftermath. The cold realization that life had shifted irrevocably. That we had crossed a line we could never uncross. We panicked. We were children, after all. And children make foolish decisions when faced with impossible truths. We dragged him from the water, but it was too late. The warmth had fled from his body, and I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, that we had been part of something final. Aaron's first words, hollow, desperate, as if saying them could undo it, haunt me. "We can't tell anyone. Nobody can know." He looked at me and Noah, eyes wild. "If we do, we're done. Everything's done." Noah was quieter, calculating as always, but his expression was unreadable. He nodded slowly, as if weighing our options, silently making the moral calculations I was too young and terrified to confront. And so we made the pact. To bury it, not just the body, but the truth. To bury it deep in the river, and even deeper in our memories. To never speak of it again. The irony is brutal. The very act meant to save us became the anchor that weighed us down for the rest of our lives. But the fractures had already begun. Even that night, even in the terror of what we had done, I could sense cracks forming. Aaron blamed me in the corner of his mind, though he would never say it aloud. Noah blamed Aaron. And I blamed, well, everyone but myself. Perhaps that was the cruelest fracture of all. 20 years later, those fractures are still there, invisible yet palpable. Each memory I have of that night is filtered through fear and guilt. I notice subtle inconsistencies when I talk to Aaron and Noah now. Details they remember differently. Facts that contradict what I swore I'd never forget. It's unnerving, because memory is supposed to be the one thing you can trust about the past. But ours? Our memories are a minefield. Aaron insists the river was calm, that the boy's death was an accident that none of us could have prevented. Noah says the current was stronger than we realized, that one small misstep doomed him. I see 100 tiny variations, each one reshaping the night in my mind, each one shifting the weight of guilt onto different shoulders. And yet, no matter whose version I consider, the truth remains. We were there, and we did nothing to prevent it. The weirdest part, though, is how the trauma has sculpted us differently. Aaron hides behind bravado now, confident, but there's a brittle edge to it. Noah has built walls of control, always precise, always measuring. And me? I buried myself in success, in law, in achievement, trying to outrun the river's memory. But the river never forgets, and now, after 20 years, it's dragging us all back to face what we hoped would stay buried. Even in flashbacks, I see contradictions. I see myself hesitating, then acting. Acting, then hesitating. And when I close my eyes, the face of the boy appears, fear, confusion, innocence stolen. Sometimes I blame Aaron. Sometimes I blame Noah. Sometimes I even blame myself. And the realization that someone, or something, remembers everything, that the river is alive with witness, terrifies me more than any courtroom ever could. Because in court, there are rules. There is procedure. There is a sense of order. Here, in this town, by this river, there is only memory, and memory is merciless. And when memories conflict, who is right? Who bears the burden of truth? And more importantly, who will be forced to confess? I notice small details around us now that I didn't notice before, marks on the trees, the way the water laps against the riverbank, even the arrangement of rocks near the bend. It feels orchestrated, like someone is nudging us, forcing us to remember in ways we cannot ignore. Every glance between Aaron and Noah carries unspoken tension. Every pause in their speech is a minefield. And I realize that fractures in memory are fractures in trust, fractures in friendship, fractures in ourselves. I replay the night over and over. The boys scream. Aaron's panic. Noah's silence. My hesitation. The cold, merciless river. I feel as if I am standing on the edge again, decades older but no less terrified. And I wonder, if memory shifts so easily, if guilt warps perception, can the truth ever truly surface? Or are we doomed to live in a fog of conflicting recollections, always suspecting one another, always doubting ourselves? The answer, I suspect, will come soon. Someone wants it to come. Someone is carefully dismantling the walls we built around our past. And the cracks are widening. Aaron breaks the silence first, his voice low but sharp. Do you remember exactly where we left him? His question is careful, almost testing. Almost fishing. I can feel the tension coil tighter around my chest. He isn't just asking. He's probing, seeing what I remember, what I fear. Noah doesn't answer. He never answers. He just watches, eyes cold and calculating, like he's weighing every syllable, every micro-expression. I remember. I remember the exact spot, the exact sequence of events, but even that memory feels unreliable. The river clouds everything, blending what happened with what I wish had happened, what I fear happened, and what I know I will never forget. Fractured memories are dangerous. They make you question yourself, question your friends, question everything you thought was true. And when the past starts manipulating the present, when someone, or something, forces you to confront it, the fractures can break you completely. I glance at Aaron. At Noah. And I realize, in this quiet, humid night by the river, that the night we buried the past wasn't an ending. It was only the beginning. The river hasn't forgotten, and neither has anyone, or anything, that has been watching us. And if we aren't careful, these fractured memories will become the weapons that destroy everything we thought we had left. Because the river remembers. And it doesn't forgive. I had convinced myself, all the way from the city to the riverbank, that returning home would be like dipping a toe into old water, familiar, maybe even comforting. I was wrong. The past doesn't wait for you to be ready. It surges forward, dragging secrets and half-truths with it, and sometimes, you're left gasping for air, wondering what pulled you under first, the memory or the river itself. The day began with a thin fog hovering over the water, a gray veil that blurred the line between reality and memory. Aaron was the first to notice something. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the edge of the bank near the bend. Small scratches, too deliberate to be natural, scarred the rocks. Someone's been here. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Who would? Why now? I asked. It was a question I had asked before, but each answer that came to mind was worse than the last. Noah didn't look at the rocks. He looked at us. "Because they want us here," he said, voice low, deliberate. "Because they want the truth. Or at least, what they think is the truth." I realized then that the past wasn't just remembering, it was being forced into the present, manipulated like a chessboard where we were the pieces. And someone had been moving those pieces carefully, patiently, for decades, waiting for this moment. We walked along the river, careful not to disturb the subtle signs. Every step felt like an intrusion, as though the river itself disapproved of our presence. And then I saw it, a note tucked between two stones, edges curling, water stained. I hesitated, fingers trembling as I picked it up. "Not all of you remember correctly." The words made my stomach drop. Someone was rewriting the past, reminding us that our memories were fallible, that the pact we thought unbreakable could no longer protect us. Aaron snatched the note from me, his hands shaking slightly. "You see," he said, voice sharp. "They're taunting us. Whoever it is, they know what we did, or at least they think they do." Noah's face hardened. "Or maybe," he said, "they know more than we know." And that was the truth I dreaded admitting. There was a third layer to that night, something hidden even from us, something we buried along with the boy. And now, after 20 years, someone had unearthed it. We spent the rest of the morning tracing the riverbank, piecing together subtle anomalies, footprints that didn't match any of us, a torn piece of clothing snagged on a branch, an old lighter that had belonged to none of us. It felt orchestrated, a series of clues left to manipulate our emotions, our memories, our guilt. I began to notice cracks in Aaron and Noah that I had never seen before. Aaron flinched at the smallest sound, avoided my gaze, his bravado slipping under the weight of fear. Noah, meticulous as ever, grew restless, counting, measuring, analyzing every possible scenario, trying to anticipate the next move of whoever, or whatever, was forcing this confrontation. And I felt myself unraveling. I had spent 20 years perfecting a life of control, but the river, the clues, the resurfacing memories, it was like watching a dam give way from the inside. Everything I thought I knew about that night was suddenly uncertain. That afternoon, we sat on the old dock, the water dark and still beneath us. The sun burned through the fog in streaks, illuminating our faces and highlighting the tension that had settled like a storm cloud. Aaron broke the silence first, his voice quieter than usual. "Luke, you remember the part no one talks about, don't you?" I froze. I did remember. But so did Noah, though he would never admit it aloud. The memory we had all tried to repress, the moment when fear overtook instinct, when one of us could have acted differently, when the choice was made that determined everything, was there, waiting for someone to name it. "I remember," I said carefully. "But I don't think that's what they want from us." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "Maybe it is. Maybe someone wants us to relive every detail. Maybe they want us to break each other down until the truth spills out." Noah leaned back, scanning the river. "Or maybe they want a confession. Not just of what we did, but of what we think we did. Memories are fragile. They bend under pressure. They twist into lies without us even knowing it." I shivered. Noah was right. Memory was unreliable, guilt malleable. And now, someone was exploiting that malleability to force us into a confrontation we had avoided for 20 years. Then came the first revelation. A name. Written in the dirt along the riverbank, partially obscured, Evan. The name stabbed at me, a knife I hadn't expected. Evan was the boy. The boy whose death we had buried along with the secrets of that night. But the handwriting, someone had written it recently. Someone was calling him back into our lives, demanding that we face what we had done, and maybe more importantly, what we had hidden from each other. Aaron paled. "But, how could they? Evan's gone. His voice trailed off, choked with disbelief and fear. Noah's expression darkened. "They're using his name because it has power over us. Because it forces memory. Because it makes us remember everything we've tried to forget." And I realized then that the manipulator didn't need to reveal themselves. They only needed to guide us, to orchestrate a series of reminders that would make our own memories turn against us. The river had been patient, quiet, and now it was complicit in their design. By evening, the atmosphere had shifted. The air was heavy, electric with anticipation. Every glance between us carried suspicion. Every gesture seemed loaded with meaning. Trust, fragile as it had always been, had begun to fracture irreparably. And I could see it, Aaron's bravado slipping into defensiveness, Noah's meticulous composure edging into paranoia, and my own carefully constructed confidence crumbling under the weight of manipulated truth. I sat by the river, watching the water lap against the shore, trying to reconcile the memories with the evidence before me. Every detail was a thread, and I had the gnawing feeling that pulling one could unravel everything. Who had left the notes, the clues, the reminders? Why now, after 20 years? And most terrifying of all, what would happen when we realized that not all of us remembered that night the same way, and maybe, just maybe, someone among us had been lying? Aaron broke the silence, voice tight. "We need to confront it. We need to talk about what happened, everything." Noah shook his head. "You don't understand. Talking won't fix this. It'll only make it worse. Because the past isn't just memory anymore. It's manipulation. And whoever's behind this knows us better than we know ourselves." I swallowed hard. I had begun to see it too, the web we had stepped into, spun by someone who had been waiting decades for us to return. The river was no longer just a witness. It was a weapon, a tool, a mirror showing us fractured reflections of who we were, who we thought we were, and who we feared we might have become. And I realized something even more frightening. The longer we stayed here, the more the river forced us to remember, the more likely it was that one of us, Aaron, Noah, or me, would break. And when that happened, the truth would finally surface. And not everyone would survive it unscathed. Because the past isn't dead. It isn't buried. And in the quiet of the river, in the fog of manipulated memory, it has teeth. I looked at Aaron and Noah, my friends, my brothers once, and saw shadows of what we had been. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. The river remembers. And so do we. But now, it wasn't just memory. It was reckoning. The river was calm when we arrived, deceptively so, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The bend where it had all begun lay ahead of us, the water dark, reflective, and infinite. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear of the river, but fear of what we would do to each other once the truth came out. Aaron was first to speak, pacing along the bank, voice taut. "We can't keep pretending anymore," he said. 20 years is enough. We've danced around it long enough. One of us is going to break soon anyway. I met his gaze, but I couldn't find anger or blame there, only fear. Fear that mirrored my own. We had all tried to survive this by controlling what we remembered, controlling each other, controlling the narrative. But here, in the shadow of the river, control was an illusion. Noah stood slightly apart, his arms crossed, expression unreadable. But I could see the tension in his jaw, the subtle twitch of his fingers. "You think speaking now will fix it?" he asked quietly. "You think words can undo the choices we made?" "They can't. They only make it worse." I took a step forward. "But hiding it has made it worse. We've all lived with this, silently, pretending the river, pretending the past, doesn't exist. But someone is forcing us to face it now. And if we don't, it will destroy us anyway." Aaron's laugh was brittle. "Destroy us? Or destroy one of us? That's what scares me. You think we all remember it the same way, but we don't." "Not really." The words landed like stones in the water. He was right. Memory isn't a single line, it's a river, twisting, splitting, shifting with time and fear. And tonight, it seemed, someone, or maybe the river itself, was forcing us to confront every split, every fork, every lie we had told ourselves. I couldn't hold it back any longer. We all made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But one thing I know, whatever happened, we were all part of it. We share the blame. Noah's eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on me. Do we? Or do we each carry different parts of it? And maybe, just maybe, someone among us, someone we trusted, knew more than the rest, manipulated events, and left the rest of us to carry the weight? Aaron froze. His bravado cracked, just slightly, like a thin layer of ice over deep water. "You're saying, one of us." "I'm saying," Noah interrupted, voice like steel, "we can't trust memory anymore. We don't even know what really happened that night. And if someone has been orchestrating this, watching, nudging, forcing us back, then they already know. And they're counting on us to tear each other apart before the truth comes out." The words hit me harder than I expected. Because deep down, I had already suspected it. Someone knew more than we did, or at least more than we admitted to each other. And they were using the fractures in our memories, our guilt, our fear, to control the narrative. The tension exploded then, abrupt and violent. Aaron stepped toward Noah, fists clenched. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Always calculating, always planning. But you didn't save him either. Don't act like you weren't just as responsible." Noah didn't flinch, didn't respond immediately. But his eyes were sharp, predatory. "And you," he said finally, voice low and cutting, You think hiding behind your charm and your bravery absolves you? You froze, Luke. You froze while it happened. And the rest of us were left to pick up the pieces. I felt the air leave my lungs. The words weren't new, they were truths we had all buried, but hearing them aloud, pointed directly at me, was like standing in a storm without shelter. Aaron's voice broke in again, higher, frantic. And you? You always said you'd protect us, Noah. You were supposed to think ahead. You didn't. We all failed. All of us. Noah's jaw tightened. And now someone's forcing us to face it. And it's not just about guilt anymore, it's about who we were that night, who we are now, and what we're willing to admit. The river hasn't forgotten. And neither has anyone else. I looked at the water, dark and infinite, and felt a cold truth settle in my chest. The river wasn't just a witness. It was a judge, an accomplice, a mirror reflecting all our fractures. And tonight, we would confront not just each other, but the version of ourselves that had survived by silence, by repression, by carefully curated memory. Aaron's voice, suddenly quiet, cut through my thoughts. Do you remember, he said, voice almost a whisper, the moment we really knew it was over? Not just an accident, over? I swallowed hard. I did remember. And so did Noah, though his expression gave nothing away. The memory was vivid, unrelenting, the scream, the splash, the hands flailing, the cold realization that there was no undoing it. And the pact. The promise to bury it. To forget it. And the unspoken betrayal that had begun the moment we left the riverbank. I remember, I said finally, voice low, trembling. I remember everything I can. And I remember that we swore we'd protect each other. Even if it meant lying to ourselves. Noah's eyes, sharp as daggers, didn't soften. But the truth doesn't care about promises. It doesn't care about loyalty or friendship. And now, it's here, demanding to be faced. Then the final revelation, the one I had feared and hoped would never surface, the truth about who had caused the fatal moment. The realization settled like ice in my veins. And as I spoke it aloud, the words felt like stones being dropped into the river. It wasn't just an accident. One of us, we chose in that moment. And someone made the wrong choice. Aaron went pale. You're saying, you know who? I hesitated. Because I did. I remembered clearly the sequence, the hesitation, the choice that had sealed our fate. And I also knew that naming it would destroy everything we had left between us. Noah's voice, quiet but firm, broke the silence. Then say it. Say the truth. I took a deep breath, looked at both of them, and let the words fall like stones into the water. It was, Aaron. That night, you pushed him. And none of us stopped it in time. None of us acted fast enough to save him. We all failed, but you set the chain in motion. Aaron's face twisted in shock, denial, fury, and something I couldn't quite place, remorse, maybe, or fear. No. That's not true. I didn't push him. You're lying. Noah stepped forward, calm but resolute. Aaron, we all saw it differently. But the truth doesn't change. And now we can't keep hiding it. Not from ourselves, not from each other. The river remembers, and it won't let us go. Aaron's hands shook as he looked at the water, the river reflecting every fear, every regret, every secret we had buried. And then, slowly, the mask of bravado fell away. For the first time in 20 years, I saw the raw fear beneath, the boy who had acted recklessly, whose choices had spiraled into tragedy. The confrontation didn't resolve neatly. The accusations, denials, and confessions spiraled into tears, screams, and silence. But something shifted. The fractures between us became visible, undeniable, yet the air was thinner now, lighter in a way. The truth had surfaced, messy and jagged, but undeniable. And the river? It flowed silently, as if judging, as if whispering that it had always known. That it had always held the past, the guilt, the fear, and now, our reckoning. We stood there for hours, wordless, the three of us broken, exposed, finally seeing each other, and ourselves, without the fog of denial. I realized then that friendship, loyalty, and memory are fragile things, and betrayal, once sown, can never fully be erased. But truth, however painful, is the only way to stop the river from claiming everything else. And as night fell, the water dark and infinite, I knew we would never forget again. The river had demanded its due, and we had given it. But some debts, I realized, are only partially paid. Because memory is selective, guilt is heavy, and the past, well, the past never truly dies. The river remembers. And so do we. The river never sleeps. It never forgets. Even in the quiet of night, when all else seems still, the water moves, carrying memories and secrets beneath its surface. I learned that firsthand tonight, standing at the edge of everything that had defined my life, watching the water reflect the faces of the friends I once trusted. Aaron and Noah left not long after our confrontation, each retreating to their own version of the past. Aaron drove off into the darkness, face pale, eyes haunted, muttering things about mistakes, blame, and what it truly means to survive. Noah walked into the trees, methodical, precise, a shadow among shadows, carrying the weight of his conscience with the same stoicism he had maintained for 20 years. And me? I stayed by the river. I couldn't leave yet. Something held me here, call it guilt, call it memory, call it the need to understand what had happened and why. The river stretched before me, black and reflective, hiding currents that could swallow everything in an instant. I stared into it, imagining the boy, imagining the choices, imagining the chain of events that had brought us here, to this impossible reckoning. I thought about our pact, the silence we had maintained for 20 years. How carefully we had buried the past, convinced ourselves that distance, success, and denial could erase it. But the truth doesn't care about silence. It doesn't care about time. It doesn't care about what we want to believe. It waits. And when the moment is right, or when someone makes it right, it surfaces. The confrontation had changed everything, though not in ways that could be neatly defined. Aaron and Noah were still my friends, but the bond that had once been unbreakable had shifted. Trust had been fractured beyond repair, replaced by something brittle and careful. We had glimpsed each other's fear, anger, and remorse in ways we had avoided for decades, and now nothing would ever be the same. I knelt by the water and let my fingers trail along the surface. The river was calm, almost serene, but I knew better. Beneath that surface, it carried every memory, every secret, every choice we had made. And it kept them all. The boy, the panic, the pact, the hesitation, the betrayal, it was all there, etched into the current like invisible scars. I thought about confession, about absolution, about whether we could ever truly reconcile with the past. Maybe some debts are impossible to pay. Maybe the river was right to demand reckoning, to force the truth into the open, even if it hurt. Maybe it was the only way to survive ourselves. And yet, there was a strange clarity in it. Confronting the truth had been excruciating, terrifying, almost unbearable. But it had also lifted a weight I didn't realize I had carried for decades. The burden of selective memory, of hidden blame, of secrets too heavy to speak aloud, it had been crushing me from the inside. And now, though the scars remained, the river had given me something I had long forgotten: perspective. I remembered the night vividly, more clearly than I had in years. I remembered Aaron's reckless laugh turning into a scream, Noah's silence morphing into decisive action, my own hesitation that had doomed us all. And I remembered the choice, the moment where responsibility could have been claimed, or shifted, and how fear had dictated our actions. The truth was simple and terrible: we were all flawed, all complicit, and yet all victims of circumstance, youth, and poor decisions. The river flowed beneath my hands as if it understood. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it held these memories not as punishment, but as testimony. To remind us, to warn us, to preserve what must never be forgotten. And maybe that was its gift as well as its curse. I realized something then: the river keeps secrets, yes, but it also keeps lessons. It keeps the truth alive in a way we cannot ignore, cannot manipulate, cannot erase. And that is why it has power over memory, over guilt, over friendship, and over betrayal. I thought about the boy, Evan. His name lingered in my mind, not as accusation, but as reminder. He had been the catalyst, the innocent force that brought out the worst and the best in us. We had failed him, yes, but we had also survived. And survival, as I now understood, carries its own weight, its own reckoning. I stood and looked upstream, watching the dark water twist and turn. Somewhere in the distance, the river curved around the bend where everything had started, where choices had been made, and where lives had been changed forever. I thought of Aaron and Noah, each grappling with the river in their own way, and I understood that our paths were no longer parallel, no longer intertwined as seamlessly as they had once been. But the river remained, a constant, impartial witness. The night was quiet, save for the gentle lapping of water against the bank. Stars reflected faintly in the surface, fractured and shifting with the ripples. And I realized that memory works the same way: fractured, shifting, sometimes unreliable, but always present. We can bury it, we can manipulate it, we can even forget, but it never truly disappears. I finally allowed myself to breathe fully, to let the weight of decades settle into a different kind of awareness. The river had taken, yes, but it had also revealed. The confrontation had torn open old wounds, but it had also given us the chance to see each other, and ourselves, without pretense. That was something worth holding on to, fragile as it was. I began walking along the riverbank, feeling the cool night air on my face. Memories came in flashes, unbidden: laughter, panic, shouting, silence, water. And each one reminded me of what we had lost, what we had survived, and what we could never undo. But I also realized something else: the river doesn't just keep the past. It keeps us accountable, it keeps us present, it keeps us honest in ways we cannot always appreciate. And if we are willing to face it, it can teach us to live differently, to act differently, and perhaps, even to forgive, though forgiveness would be a long and winding journey. I paused and looked at the water one last time before turning back toward the path leading to the town. The river had demanded truth, confrontation, and reckoning. It had taken more than I would ever have wanted, but it had also given clarity. And I understood that what it keeps is neither vengeance nor cruelty. It is memory, impartial and enduring, a record of what we were, what we did, and what we must carry forward. As I walked away, the river stretched behind me, dark and infinite, holding every secret, every betrayal, every confession, and every moment of guilt. And I knew, as I always had, that it would never let us forget. Not fully. Not ever. Because the river keeps what we bury, and it remembers. And so, we carry it too. Thanks for listening to Brinicle Reads. If the twists of What We Buried in the River kept you on edge, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-chilling stories, hit the like button, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Remember, some secrets are meant to stay buried, but the river never forgets.